What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Walkout Network. It's your man, Ant Walker, here with another edition of Unleashed, the weekly panel discussion show. And I'm always excited to introduce a fantastic panel to you. But I'm particularly excited this week because a good buddy I made recently at an event this year, UFC 239, got to sit beside, hang out with, and chat with Kristen King, the MMA extraordinaire of FanSided. So, Kristen, what's up? Thank you for joining.
Thank you for having me. I can't tell you how long I waited for that DM to ask me to be on your show. I'm not going to say that I was going to stalk you over it, but I was definitely waiting for it. So I'm super excited to be here with you and Jay and Ben.
It's like you can't stalk the willing, okay? It's just what it is.
True. Okay, got it. So, no.
All right, so of course, we've got the jack of all trades who's mastered them all, Mr. Ben Duffy, the senior editor of Sherdog.com. Ben, how are you doing, my man?
The only thing I have mastered in the past week is a 6-hour drive twice.
Oh. The sacrifices we make for La Howla.
I am sure we'll get to that at some point, but mostly I'm just really excited to be here with y'all. Plenty to talk about this week.
Hell to the yes. Always a pleasure to have you on, Ben. And of course, the panel is anchored by the man with the math, the statistician, the statistical expert. He is also of Sherdog.com. You know him as Jay Petrie. Jay, how are you feeling, brother?
You know, everybody, I am really excited for this show. I think that the 2-week absence really charged us up, you know, the no fights on the UFC, because this card did something. So with that, my stat of the week is 4. We got visual aids now. 4. 4 seconds to go before Alistair Overeem would have gone the distance. So in doing so, making Rozenstruik's knockout the latest in UFC heavyweight history. Beats Cain Velasquez's, beats Rico Rodriguez's. 4 seconds. That's all he had to do was make it 4 more seconds.
Well, those are
good thing too, because the urgent care was about to close.
Yeah, all the plastic surgeons were almost off duty. So, but now let's go ahead and start with that topic, because Alistair Overeem and Jared Rosenstruck had their main event at UFC D.C., my hometown, Washington, D.C., over the weekend. And the fight was stopped very, very close to the final bell. Controversial stoppage. So I'll start with you, Kristen. Swing or miss? That was a bad stoppage.
At first, it definitely looked like a bad stoppage because I had no idea what Dan Miragliotta was doing when he stepped in the middle of them and then did not immediately wave it off. So I think a lot of people were confused. But now that you look at it and you see the kind of injury sustained by Overeem, and then immediately when he got up, he stumbled a little bit, so you could tell he wasn't in it anymore. So it may have looked like a bad stoppage, but it definitely was not one. I think at that point, Overeem was pretty much done. I mean, I think he was handily winning the fight, but all it takes is that one punch, you know what I mean? So definitely not a bad stoppage. And I mean, come on. Did you want to see that person possibly get the rest of their lip detached from their face? No, you didn't. So it was a good stoppage.
Maybe just a little bit. I don't know, maybe just a little bit.
You're a sick person. No, you don't want to see that. That is hard to fix. I mean, I wouldn't know, but I'd imagine it's hard to fix. So
yeah, that looked pretty gnarly. I mean, we definitely will have a little discussion about that later in the show, that particular injury. But Kristen, one thing that I certainly agree with in your assessment of that was Overeem's demeanor as soon as that fight was stopped. Now, what I noticed was that when Overeem got up, he didn't walk toward Rozenstruik. He started walking away. Mm-hmm. And that instantly made me think, okay, he is out on his feet. Ben, Jay, do you agree with me or are you wrong?
Well, I love it when you put it that way. Obviously, because I was covering an event live on Saturday night, I've just caught up on these fights really Sunday. But watching it, already knowing what was going to happen, but at the same time, kind of divorced from the in-the-moment adrenaline, this is happening right now, I'm completely on board with the stoppage coming when and where it was. Once Overeem got up looking like that, with his mouth looking like that, I don't care if it was 50 seconds into the first round or 5 seconds left in the last round. That fight is over. Like, he can't continue fighting like that safely without risking some actual serious permanent injury. So, I mean, the fact that Rozenstruik probably wouldn't have been able to, like, you know, pounce on him and make it worse in however many seconds were left, irrelevant. At that moment, however much time was left, he was not fit to continue. Good stoppage.
Jay, any thoughts on the stoppage you'd like to share?
I'm bringing some dissension to the booth today. I think it was a bad stoppage. Why do I think it was a bad stoppage?
Because you worship the devil. Like,
yes, a little bit.
Blood for the blood god, like says Jay.
Okay, now seriously, was Overeem done? Probably. Was the cut nasty and fight ending? Again, probably. But the way Miragliotta stopped it didn't allow for us to figure anything out. When there's a cut that happens, doctors should be coming in to check it out. It's a very rare occurrence where the referee will wave off a fight due to cuts. In fact, we used to have a differentiation between the two in TKO cuts, like one that Marvin Eastman had versus one, an obvious, well, obviously his forehead's here and here, so you can't continue, versus, okay, the doctor's advice can check that out. It wouldn't have hurt anybody to bring the doctor in, other than potentially allow Overeem to regain his faculties. But the way it went down, like Kristen said, Miragliotta got in the middle. But I was very clear to pay attention to this and write this down in the Sherdog.com official play-by-play. He didn't end the fight. He didn't call it. He came over there, checked him. I believe, it's hard to see from the angle, put his hand on Rozenstruik's back. But he didn't stop the fight. He allowed Overeem to get back to his feet and then kind of wobble and fall off on the cage. But this isn't boxing. There's no standing 8 count. There's no, okay, give me a second. All right, let's see how you're doing. Oh, okay, yeah, it's probably too late, and the boxing referee would call it off. If the cut by itself was enough to stop the fight, okay, get the doctor in and stop it. If the punch by itself and the knockout and the impact was enough to stop it, okay, then stop the fight. Don't half stop the fight with 4 seconds left and have Rozenstruik walk away. I agree with what was said earlier. If Rozenstruik had known, oh crap, the fight isn't over, he didn't have anything left in the tank to run over in 4 seconds and put a hurting on him. I think that there are some things that could have been done better. It wasn't a good night for Miragliotta for me.
All right. So the last question I want to ask about this is Alistair Overeem, why so serious? All right, so
see how I got my scar.
Now, we did talk a little bit about officiating there, and one very controversial aspect of the officiating on Saturday night in Washington D.C. were 2 draws. Very rare that we see 2 draws on the same event. Now, Rodriguez and Calvillo had their draw, and so did Song Yadong and Cody Stamann in the unofficial cockfight. So, would you like to see either of these fights run back? And just out of curiosity, how did you score any of those fights? Ben, I'll start with you.
I did not watch Rodriguez versus Calvillo closely enough to really talk intelligently on that. Like, seriously, I had that running with my phone just sitting in the passenger seat of my car as I drove 350 miles straight northeast, like not even really looking, but just listening to the commentary and kind of like, so I can't speak to that one. Song versus Stamann was atrocious, and I would like to see it again. I would be fine seeing that again, even though, I mean, it wasn't that close a fight. The decision was controversial, but the fight wasn't that controversial. I thought Stamann won it very clearly. I was completely unsurprised in the aftermath to hear that 2 of the 3 judges were boxing judges who had never judged an MMA fight before, period. And the other had never judged a UFC fight and had only done some MMA like years ago. Not surprising at all. And as a fellow denizen or former denizen of the DC area, I'm not surprised, Mr. Falcons, that kind of regulatory fuckery happened.
I'm kind of surprised that happened. Not that DC is known for, high level mixed martial arts, but there are plenty of mixed martial arts events that happen in the greater Washington DC area. There's Shogun fights. There's that promotion that used to be called Operation Octagon. What is it now, like OO fights or something like that, I think it's called. So even if you're talking about regional or amateur cards, there's mixed martial arts. So why would you go to the boxing judges? to make their MMA judging debut on a UFC main card. Really? Get the fuck out of here. That's nuts.
Hadn't watched a mixed martial arts bout since Easton
Since
versus
Jurassic
BB
Hollywood.
back in like 2008.
Oh yeah, I was gonna say Art Jimison.
Yeah,
It's like, wow, they are really behind the times there. So
James Toney.
Kristen, can you share your assessment of the scores in both of those draws?
Yeah, so for the Rodriguez and Calvillo fight, I had it pretty clear for Rodriguez. I thought the first 2 rounds she looked sensational, and then obviously the 3rd round Calvillo kind of had like a resurgence, and that was good. I don't know if I was necessarily surprised to see the 10-8 scores. She was being pretty dominant on the ground, so I could see how there was an argument for that. But for that to be scored as a draw, I thought that was absolutely ridiculous. That should not have been a draw. And I think it's pretty clear that Rodriguez won that fight. As far as Cody Stamann and Song Yadong, I understand what Ben is saying. Like, the fight itself definitely wasn't controversial. It's just the scorecards. And I certainly had Stamann up by 2. So I don't know what the judges were seeing at that point. It was a very closely contested fight. It could have gone either way at one point, but I think towards the end, at the 3rd round, it's like, all right, it's pretty clear that Cody Stamann won. And with the controversy with the judges, you know what? I don't know if you guys have seen it on social media, but he's been pretty riled up by it. He's upset that he should not have lost that fight. And I'm wondering, and I don't know if it's my place to ask the question to you guys, to the panel, but does he have a case to make an appeal? Like, should he contest that decision was wrong? Should he get it overturned somehow? Does he have a case, essentially?
He has a case, but it doesn't matter because there have been clear times in mixed martial arts where decisions should have been overturned and results should have been challenged, but nothing happens. I mean, at the end of the day, it's just, do they feel like changing it or not? And typically the answer is no.
Right.
Overwhelmingly.
Overwhelmingly,
the answer is no. If he wants to appeal it simply as a symbolic gesture to have the record show that he appealed it and have whatever he wants to say about it in the record, great. But seriously, how many times in a North American jurisdiction has a judge's decision been overturned for something other than actual math error?
Exactly. Right. So that's why I was kind of like, it was kind of weird for me. I think I spoke to a few months back, like Mike Kimball. He had a fight in Bellator, and I think the scores were some weird scoring. And he's like, I'm pretty sure that I won by unanimous decision, and I'm going to fight to get it turned that way. But eventually he got talked out of it because it's like, well, you already won the fight. Like, there's no point in trying to, like, redo this. But I think with Stamann, it's a different story because a draw, come on, that sucks. No one wants to have a draw, especially with a fight that you pretty clearly won. So, I mean, I understand if him and his team would want to do something like that, but it's like, why don't you guys just rematch like in a couple months and then we'll see who's the true winner.
Right. And then you also got to factor in that when it comes to contract negotiations and he has a draw on his record, no matter how clearly he actually won that fight, the UFC is going to treat you like you didn't win that fight. And they are going to approach you with money that says you didn't win that fight. So there are a lot of complexities about this, but I just don't expect any athletic commission to help resolve the situation in any satisfactory fashion, that if it involves an iota of effort on their part.
Well, maybe the existence of an athletic commission is the real problem. That bell you just heard is like Rich Franklin sliding into Stamann's DMs right now. It's a shame you guys have to worry about that whole regulation thing. We would have overturned it.
Competition committee?
Committee. Oh, Matt Hume be right on that, man. It's funny because at some point you think, I have heard this before, and it's usually not North American commissions. It's usually CAB MMA in Brazil, where they will actually have an independent, I'm using independent very loosely, different set of scorers score the fight and turn in their results. And then the promoter and the commission can decide, hey, maybe not. Yeah.
Like the B sample of.
Yes. And this is actually a recent thing I ran into on the Fight Finder where this exact situation happened, where a fighter contested the results and said, hey, there were too many 10-8s or something. We need you to rescore this. And they sent a separate set of scores from a separate set of judges. I mean, ideally, this would be the kind of situation where they could do something just like that, have somebody else score the fight. they don't really have any standing to overturn the result because the judges were appointed, however, whatever awful process put them in place. But I'll say something. I'm going to be the rebel tonight. I had the fight score to draw. And here's why. Round 1, I had Song Yadong by a very narrow margin winning that round, but he lost a point because of the illegal knee, which made it a 9-9 round. Now, I had that the strike stats were identical. He defended most of the takedowns, and the 2 that landed by Stamen were he popped right back up afterwards. So they didn't amount to any additional offense or anything like that. I didn't score those takedowns to give him a grappling advantage in the scoring because of how Song not only defended the position when he was taken down those 2 times, but defending all other 4 or 5 along the way. I have to give some credence to the fact that a fighter can stave off takedown attempts in the absence of anything else going on. So I understand that there is definite controversy, but that's the way I had it on my first watch. And then round 2 for Song, round 3 for Stamen. But there is one other thing that I wish that commissions would be okay with, because this is how it had been for very special occasions. A sudden victory round, not a sudden death. It's a sudden victory round where if there's a draw in these certain situations, they'd have to fight to round 4. And I could see that solving some of these problems. It's no mistake. We've had 5 draws this year in the UFC. It's, almost a record. We're approaching a record. I think the record was 7. So clear up the confusion. Have them fight round 4. You're allowed to fight up to 5 rounds in a night in most jurisdictions. And it is specifically allowed in many instances. Ultimate Fighter. PFL was trying to do that before that whole, PFL's PFL. But there is some precedent for a 4th round. I would like to see that. But realistically, the fight that I want to see run back more than those 2 is Stefan Struve versus Ben Rothwell. Just saying.
All right. Speaking of which, what do we think about Dan Miragliotta handling that situation?
So the fight I want to see run back I guess I'll bounce into this. No, he didn't handle this fight properly. Okay, groin kicks happen. It's a part of the sport. Stefan Struve is 7 feet tall, so body kick, and this is something that Ben Rothwell said to very comedic effect, that if this were any other fighter, the body kicks would have landed on his body and not his groin. Now, of course, you have to make adaptations to who you're fighting, pay attention to what you're doing. You're in charge of your own weapons, the cliches. But where I erred with Dan Miragliotta's handling the situation was what he said, and I don't know if any of you heard it on the broadcast. Between rounds, it was after the second groin strike. He covered up his microphone, but you could still hear his words, essentially letting Stefan Struve know, you're probably up 2 rounds, and I'm going to take a point away, so just keep that in mind. Okay, taking a point away, letting him know you're taking a point away, all right, that's probably something that's proper, to let the other fighter know, just to let you know the other fighter is being deducted a point. But when you start stepping into the other territory, as I said on Beatdown After the Bell the other night, it's undue influence on the fighter. The fighter's decision-making is now influenced by knowledge by a third party they didn't have beforehand. And that's really troubling to me, because Struve could have easily decided, well, if I'm up and it goes to a technical decision, depending on how the jurisdiction sees it, well, I've won, so I'm out. So this was such a bad night for Dan Miragliotta. I feel for the guy, because these are hard judgment calls you have to make. But I'll pose this question to y'all, in addition to did he handle it right? Should anything be done in regards to Dan Miragliotta and his licensing?
Yes, I think so. I think the fact that he covered up the microphone shows that he knew that he was doing something he shouldn't be doing. That shows a very clear intent. And keep in mind, we're only just a couple of months, if that, from his incident with MVP. I think we need to pump the brakes on him, and I think he's a fantastic ref most of the time. But this was not a good showing, and not just not a good showing in that you had a bad day, but you went above and beyond to skirt the rules, and that's kind of where we got to draw a line in the sand. Yeah. Any more thoughts on this, Kristen? Looks like you got something brewing.
Yeah, I thought Ben was gonna go, so I was waiting for him. But yeah, it was definitely not a great night for Dan Miragliotta. He's certainly not a coach by any means. Whenever those cage doors closed, so I honestly did not understand why he was saying that. At first, I was concerned about him telling Struve that he was taking the point away, but then, as Jay pointed out, that's probably proper at that point, so it didn't seem like that big of a deal. But as soon as I heard the other words saying that you're probably up 2-0 at this point, I was like, that's not your call to make. You don't know what Stefan's coaches were telling him prior to that round. And also, I think it's really bothersome that I think Ben Rothwell said it in his post-fight victory speech when he's like, yeah, Stefan Struve didn't take the easy way out. And it's like, well, even if he decided not to continue, it's not necessarily the easy way out. You did just kick this man in the appendage that I don't have, so I have no idea how bad that hurts for you guys. But based off of his reaction, I'm just going to assume that that hurts like hell, and I would probably not wish that on anyone that I know, especially any male. So I feel for you guys, but you guys can keep that part of the game. I honestly don't feel like it would have been the easy way out. And of course, Stefan Struve is now finding himself backed up against the wall, having to defend himself, having to go against all these trolls online and saying all these things. And it really sucks because he came out of retirement for this. I'm pretty sure he did not see his comeback fight, even though the retirement was short. I'm pretty sure he did not see it going this way. And yeah, he probably was winning the fight. So I know he's disappointed, but I definitely do hope that they run it back because there's always going to be an asterisk on that fight.
Yeah, I don't think you can be happy about that victory if you're Ben Rothwell. I don't, even with his post-fight speech complimenting Struve for toughing it out and whatnot, which, too tough for your own good, I think, in that situation. But there's nothing to celebrate there, Ben. What's your take on this whole matter?
Stefan Struve is too kind and sensitive a person for this sport. I wish he had stayed retired. He's just a kind of funny, witty, clever dude. Too tough for his own good in some cases. I mean, we're talking about a guy, leaving aside the panic attacks, leaving aside the double nut
hole
shot
in his heart. Oh,
yeah, the hole in his heart.
He's
okay,
like
sorry, I didn't want to steal your thunder.
Being diagnosed with a hole in his heart. Yeah, I feel for him. He was very good humored in the aftermath, but the last thing I need to see is this fight run back. Whatever they need to do to make nobody feel like we need to do this again is what I want.
I'd like Struve to go do the rematch, but wear a steel cup this time.
I think he did. No, he advertises special cups like a Joe Rogan Diamond MMA cup.
Like the diamond one.
Yeah, the one that the Joe Rogan has.
I guess it doesn't work that
before.
good.
Yeah, right.
He might have referenced it one time.
Worst commercial
there's something
ever.
else I want to bring up real quick. The broadcast itself, when Struve was down and out. Well, first of all, when you're fouled, is a very specific instruction from the referee. No coaching. You can't coach your fighter when he's taking a break, whatever. So Miragliotta, meanwhile, was coaching him. But when Struve was attempting to recover, I laughed because I don't have another expression that could properly convey what I'm feeling right now. The crowd audibly reacted different ways depending on the way he tilted his head. If he lifted, and I was paying very close attention, if he lifted his head up, they cheered raucously. If he lowered it, they booed him horrendously. It was loud. It was unusual. It was also, I mentioned undue influence, and I said it on Beatdown that, you got to feel for the guy. Struve, that is.
Did you see his comment on that part of it?
Just
did my balls do something to them?
I laughed for minutes. Meanwhile, I'm giving birth to a Charizard, and they're booing and cheering me. I hurt after that.
Wait, Ant, and let me ask you a question, Ant.
Yeah.
since that's your hometown, is everybody that petty? Because when I was watching that too, I was like, come on, he just got kicked down there. You can't do that. But then after a while, I had to give in. I had to start cracking up.
It was so ridiculous. Like there was not a fraction of me surprised by that at all. Like I'm telling you, that area of the East Coast is super petty. You know, that's
silly.
Yeah, like I mean, y'all know me, so y'all know how petty I can be. So
that's why I had to ask.
And I'm pretty mild. I'm pretty mild on the scale. So this is the best that there is on that. Like Luke Thomas is from D.C. So it's just petty. We're just petty. That's
He's a well-measured, respectful gentleman, you know.
Yeah. So am I. So yeah, and I do want to end this topic by just addressing something that Ben Rothwell said about if it was someone else, those would have been kicks to the body. A true man gets kicked in the groin from a low calf kick, but that's another story. So we're gonna move on to to talk about what Ben was doing Saturday while our hometown of the DMV was going crazy over Stefan Struve's head position. And you, sir, were in Hidalgo, Texas to watch the Punisher logo with Trump's wig on top of it fight a WWE champion. So what the fuck?
I mean, that was a rejected tagline for the event. You know, they ended up going with you know, what side are you on? But what the fuck was, you know, that it made the quarterfinals. Yeah, I could have stayed right here in lovely Houston, Texas, and watched Gordon Ryan and Bo Nickel have the weird style versus style matchup. But instead, I chose to hit the road, drive 6 hours down to the Rio Grande Valley within a literal stone's throw of the Mexico border, and watch Combate Americas Tito versus Alberto. A couple of firsts for the promotion. It was their first foray into the pay-per-view market. It was also their first women's title fight of any kind. So, you know, kind of a momentous occasion for the world's premier Spanish-speaking MMA promotion. And I was there to take it in all its glory. And it was a very mixed glory. There was quite the mix of genuine excitement, I'm in the building, and being reminded why I love this sport. And, you know, probably 2 scoops of what the fuck. You know, definitely, you know, not short of raisins was this box of raisin fuckery brand.
Deep in hell.
The less said about the actual main event, the better. All I'll say about that is that it made Chuck versus Tito 3 look like Lawler versus McDonald 2 by comparison, in terms of the competitiveness, the suspense, and the amount of effort that the winning fighter had to put out.
You know what? I actually thought that this was a better fight than Chuck Tito 3. I mean, it's a very low bar, but for 90 seconds before he totally gassed out, Alberto actually did a couple of things that looked like good grappling.
This is where we pause the video and I explain the concept of kayfabe to Ant. No, I mean, they were there to put on a show. More interestingly was just it was a bit of a chaotic mess behind the scenes. I don't think it would have been obvious to the average person in the stands. I think all the fans that went there probably left considering themselves very well entertained, and maybe even having taken in a life-changing experience through the healing power of the red, white, and blue and Hulk Hogan's theme song. You know, the crowd bought into this 100%. And the part of me that still is that fan, and the part of me that has not yet turned 13 and stopped watching professional wrestling, felt that as well. Like, part of me left that arena charged up, like, that was awesome. And the rest of me was like, what even is this? You know, what have I driven 6 hours to see?
At least
the real question
Chuck
for
Tito
them
was a short car ride for me. So
Real question for Combate is what happens next. I haven't seen the pay-per-view numbers, but Jay asked me this earlier. Do you think we'll see them do another pay-per-view? And my immediate off-the-cuff answer was, yep, I think they'll do it again. They ran the pay-per-view through Fight, which is essentially a risk-free proposition for them. If you sell 100,000 pay-per-views through Fight, wave your hands and turn the lights back on.
I am buying you a clapper for Christmas. You can't fight me on this.
Yeah, I'll get up and just like walk around. I'll be right back.
What was I? Oh, I mean, going through Fight, if you sell 100,000 pay-per-views, great. You get a chunk of money. If you sell 15 pay-per-views, it's not like you owe them money. It is an essentially risk-free proposition. What made, and I use this as a comparison, what made Golden Boy MMA a disaster is that they took out an expensive venue and expensive talent. I mean, did that run at the Forum?
Golden Boy, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so they went to the Forum in Inglewood, which is not a cheap venue. I mean, it might be reasonably priced by greater LA standards, but I assure you that Payne Arena in Hidalgo, Texas, cost less than like renting out a hot dog cart space at the Forum. And number two, Golden Boy signed a bunch of ex-UFC talent and explicitly overpaid them. What was the whole thing that Oscar said going in? These guys have never been paid fairly. Everyone on the Golden Boy lineup is getting the best payday of their career, which when you have like 5 0-0 fighters on your card is pretty easy promise to keep. But I mean, he took a bunch of ex-UFC fighters and explicitly paid them more than they were used to getting. So, of course, it was unsustainable. And, of course, it was a disaster. And, of course, it apparently sank the promotion. Combate did not make any of those mistakes. Whatever maybe, I poke fun at about Combate, they are fighting guerrilla warfare, and they always have. They're like, we're going to specifically target the Spanish-speaking market, both inside and outside the U.S., and we're going to go to where they are. We're going to play out-of-the-way places that are heavily Hispanic, and we're going to, for the most part, build our own talent from the ground up. Even if this was a complete disaster from a pay-per-view standpoint, and it may not have been, it doesn't ruin Combate because they're doing what they've always been doing. They're putting on shows for a specific audience on a shoestring budget, and even the main event featured their own company president. I'm sure that they didn't have to pay him too much. So I had a good experience overall, even though my column about it was, full of punchlines and snark and some legitimate criticism of what they're doing. But I expect we'll see him in the pay-per-view market again.
Yeah, should be interesting. I don't know. Kristen, did you catch this one live or just catch it at all?
I did not. I was not going to subject myself to that because I kind of knew what was going to happen. And I think everyone else knew what was going to happen, so I didn't feel like chucking up the coin for that. As far as them having another pay-per-view, I definitely agree with Ben. They're totally going to have another pay-per-view now that they've introduced themselves to the market with this fight that is supposedly huge for them. Obviously, with Tito and Alberto, that was a really big thing. Now I hope for the next pay-per-view, we actually get to showcase a lot of the talent that Combate has and not focus on kind of like the narrative of the fights and the shenanigans of the fight. Because obviously there was a different narrative, like a political narrative when it came to Alberto and Tito. And we saw that on full display. And I just hope that they put the same amount of energy into all the young talent that they have there, because they have some seriously good fighters over there at Combate. I love watching the promotion. So I hope they also get their chance to shine whenever that next pay-per-view may be.
All right. So Jay, any final thoughts on this?
Well, I was going to ask if any of you were able to listen to the broadcast, because I was covering play-by-play at the time for the UFC card that just happened to be at the exact same moment because, of course, I don't know why they didn't put the show on Friday. No competition. But anyway, I digress. I was able to listen to part of the commentary. And first of all, I don't recall, and I maybe I'll rewatch it. No, I won't. That I don't recall hearing Jorge Masvidal on the broadcast. I don't, because that's where they would have him talking about the fight. I do specifically, and TJ DeSantis reminded me of this, remember that Juliana Pena, the other color commentator, and current UFC fighter, I think she's on hiatus anyway, she was very hyping Alberto and his maneuvers and the little successes he may have had along the way. It was fairly transparent. It wasn't, he would move and kind of almost get a suplex, but not really, and end up in worse position. And she would audibly cheer that he did something. My thoughts on a pay-per-view, a future pay-per-view, and I thought about responding to you specifically, Ben, but I thought I'd save it for the broadcast. I don't see it because they need to have a draw. Pay-per-view has to have a justification for people to shell out $30, $40 on a show, and absent Tito Ortiz, that's it. I have gone through the roster of Combate Americas. It's respectable. There are good fighters. They could potentially flourish on Access TV, but you wouldn't put on an LFA pay-per-view card. The roster in that level of sport, it's just hard to justify throwing half the price of a UFC pay-per-view at a regional level card. Again, respect to the fighters, there are levels to this game. Tito was the only draw they have, and I don't know if he is on loan from Bellator because Golden Boy had him for one fight and let him go, or Combate has him. I don't know if they have him for any extended deal, but even if they did, who are they going to get him to fight next? They would have to bring somebody over or anything like that. They have a niche, and that's stick to crossover lucha libre fighters, stick to Spanish-speaking market. That's a legitimate niche. There are hundreds of thousands of people that may or may not be watching the show. It's not one championship levels of, oh my gosh, we have millions of viewers watching. But they can carve out a market. But absent that, there's just no current situation for plunking down, like Kristen said, to think I want to throw money at this thing. It's not going to get better the way they have it now.
Yeah, I'm kind of agreeing with you on that one, Jay. It's not
putting this out there.
Yeah,
Frank Shamrock's real last name is Juarez.
It's true.
Yeah, but see, true. that's because he was there, wasn't he?
Ken Shamrock was supposed to be there, and I threw out the challenge. If he shoves the winner of the headline fight, take a shot. If he challenges the winner of the headline fight, finish your drink. But he didn't show up, so I was pretty disappointed.
But you took a drink regardless. So
I wish I had. There was a stand behind me because for some reason press row was a bunch of like makeshift tables in the upper give me the oxygen balcony in front of a stand selling a Budweiser and Bud Light 16-ounce drafts for $4 all night. Now, think of all the sporting events you've been to in person. When was the last time that even mass brewed drafts in the venue were $4 for a pint?
That's just not a
baseball game.
I should have started pounding that shit halfway through the second fight. I did not. I maintained the veneer of professionalism, almost alone among press row.
You would have
I'll get to that with you
once
we turn the record button off. But
yeah, I think you wouldn't have been just out of line for just doing a line of coke right on press row for this one. You get that sweater from Walmart that I was tweeting about earlier today.
I would buy that for $1.
I want three.
So would wear that. Yes, I need that. I need that sweater. All right, so now we're going to move on to the best titled segment in all of media history, and that is I'm Not Surprised, Mr. Falcons. This is where you get to share what surprised you the most about the fights this weekend, the fights themselves, the pre-fight, the post-fight, anything surrounding any of the plethora of events that we had. So we will start with our special guest, Kristen. What is your I'm Not Surprised, Mr. Falcons moment of the week?
For me, it's not going to be anything MMA related. It's actually going to be boxing related. Obviously, we had the Anthony Joshua and Andy Ruiz rematch. And I think afterwards when he said, yeah, I didn't really train too much for this fight, I kind of put on the pounds, stuff like that, I was like, yeah, I'm definitely not surprised by that. What I was surprised, I was just surprised by the fact that he would even openly admit that. I mean, it was pretty obvious at that point, but for you to just come out straight away and say, yeah, well, I didn't do the things that I did the last time we fought. It was just weird. I was like, you're not supposed to say that in defeat, just give credit to Anthony Joshua, move on and stuff like that. But basically it was like, I had a shit fight because I trained pretty shitty. And that was that.
What I found really hilarious about that whole thing was that there were so many people that thought this was some sort of master strategy, that he gained all this weight after the first fight. And you're like, it's like, wow, so this guy you'd never heard of before, he suddenly runs into this huge multi-million-dollar payday. He's a champion. He's famous. He's on the talk show circuit. And now you're surprised that the idea that he enjoyed the spoils of warfare a little bit too much, had too much steak, too much lobster, and now I didn't gain some weight. Come on now. Like, really?
Sponsored by Snickers.
Yeah, like, shit,
not
man.
Going anywhere for a while?
Well, definitely not going to the gym. So, so Ben, share with us, please, your I'm not surprised Mr. Falcons moment for the week.
Well, obviously my weekend was kind of eaten up by one thing, and I've been catching up on everything else since then. But it was interesting to be in the same room as Tito Ortiz in a pair of 4-ounce gloves, whatever state he may be in competitively. An interesting thing happened. Obviously, Combate played up this whole card as a sort of political, cultural, social clash. I mean, their tagline for it was, "What side are you on?" And, it played out on several levels. Are you on the side of the red cap wearing American of partial Hispanic origin that is, saying kind of all the trollish things? Or are you on the side of the proudly Mexican second generation luchador? Or, they put this event literally 1,000 yards at most from the Mexico border. I said this in my column, but when I went to schedule a hotel for this stay, of the 10 closest hotels to the venue, 4 were in Mexico. Like, you literally can't get any closer to the border without somebody pointing a flashlight at you that is on top of a gun. So when they say, "What side are you on?" and they are targeting themselves at the Spanish-speaking audience, both inside and outside of America, that's an evocative question. What side of this line right next to the venue are you on? So with that, throughout the event, they were doing a hashtag race. Team Tito, Team Alberto. And I have the feeling that if the pay-per-view sold anything like I expect that it did, most of the votes were coming from inside the arena. The first time they put the vote up, it was 83% for Alberto and 18% for Tito. Now, leaving aside for a moment that adds up to more than 100, because I did notice that as well. It got closer and closer as the night went along. And Tito was edging out Alberto by the end. But when he entered the arena, the place went absolutely bananas for him. And I've been to a good share of mixed martial arts events and combat sports events of all kinds, both in a professional capacity and then for a much longer period than that, as a fan, as the guy in the stands who on some kind of emotional level was, sinking a hook into one or the other fighter for whatever reason. Either their actual fight style or the persona and the kind of narrative that followed along and saying, I'm hitching my bus to this guy. Just the kind of magnetism that Tito Ortiz, even at age 42, even well removed from his competitive prime, still commands. And he did all of his usual cheesy stuff, aside from the fact that he has a much, well, if he has a hairline, I couldn't find it. Other than that, he's the same Tito he's been for 18 or 20 years, but still just magnetizes a crowd. Just, it was interesting to see. And the ridiculousness of the event aside, it made me wish that I had seen him fight in person in his prime. Because I've certainly been a fan of the sport and seeing live events since, he was at least in the title picture in the UFC. But just through sheer luck, I never saw him fight live until 2 days ago, by which time his expiration date was literally a decade in the rearview mirror. But there are certain things that you don't lose with age. They say power is the last thing to go, but perhaps it is star power that they really mean.
Ooh, that's so poetic. I don't even want to follow it with a joke now. That was bars right there.
Oh, excellent. All I live for is to get you to
too.
say bars after I say some shit. All right, they're
Like,
good.
God damn, son.
It's better than Nick Cannon, so you're good.
Oh.
What are they doing?
I took a sturdy dump at a truck stop on the way home from the Rio Grande Valley that's got more bars than Nick Cannon. And it had the sense to leave Eminem alone.
But let's also just put on record that Eminem's bars to lure Nick Cannon out. First of all, this is a trash feud in general that years ago was trash. So no point in bringing this back up again because it was for stupid shit back then. But now the bars that M used to try to lure Nick out, super trash as well. Like this is garbage all around. Just throw the whole thing away.
Basura.
Yeah.
Basura.
Oh yeah, basura. Jay, please share your I'm not surprised Mr. Falcons moment.
Well, I am most surprised that the thing I expected would be taken has not been taken yet. So I didn't actually prepare a lot on that, expecting somebody else would have grabbed that one. So let's go to my I love the number 2. So anyway, opening preliminary fight of UFC Washington, D.C., Mahmoud Muradov, who is the lone fighter managed by Floyd Mayweather and Mayweather Promotions, fought Trevor Smith at middleweight. Good fight. Muradov had him beaten to the punch. He was quicker. He was more loose. He was able to get to him while Smith decided to try and throw bombs. So Muradov's working him, getting Smith tired, and Smith is just, he's in that desperation mode. Third round comes out. You're like, crap, I probably need a knockout, and starts just kind of biting down at his mouthpiece, throwing bombs. Muradov's in shockingly good shape, just keeping it high and tight, keeping it out of the way. No big deal there. So he's working the body, getting Smith to drop his hand, and he starts slapping his own body, saying, I got you there. I got you there. So as Smith is coming at him with a big telegraph looping left hand, Muradov hits a beautiful combination. It's a right to the body, left up top, and a right hook from downtown that hits Smith right on the jaw, sends his mouthpiece careening from his mouth. He's out. He's gone. He is on Planet 9. Down, face down, over. It was just magnificent, the way he went down and everything like that. It's the kind of knockout you would see on like one of those undisputed UFC games on PlayStation 2, where the mouthpiece would go flying and be like, that isn't how most knockouts happen. Yes, exactly. It was one of those knockouts. It is the highlight reel, the perfect big right hand where the combination set it up. He dropped his hand down because the body shot hit him up top. It's flying out of the way. Just everything about it, how it went down, other than one particular maneuver that happened that night. That made me jump out of my seat when I saw it. I had to go, whoa, oh my God. Then I had to realize, oh crap, I'm writing about this. I have to write this down. But just that shocking moment of, oh snap. It's worth watching again. I think we have million gift copies on the internet somewhere. Just one of those knockouts. And that shocked me.
I wish that I had a picture of my wife's face when I showed her that replay. She was just stunned, like, oh Lord. Yeah.
Bruce Buffer has a GIF where they had a camera view on on Muradov's corner, and they were freaking out. Yeah, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. And it pans by, and you see Bruce Buffer just sitting there going, like a stunned, like Bruce Buffer's seen everything. He's called 400 and something UFC events.
And he's blown out his own knee in the cage. So
he has torn his own ACL jumping in the air. He has more injuries than most fighters have. And even he was like, damn. So that was worth it for me. And that was the first fight of the night. And
Bruce Buffer also fought Frank Trigg in an elevator. So there's that. Now,
What is it with elevators?
Yeah, no, elevators are very violent places to be.
They hurt people.
Yes. And I'm not surprised, Mr. Falcons moment. I was going to talk about the Andy Ruiz weight gain that people seem to be so startled by, which, go figure.
Surprised, Mr. Falcons.
But I'll take it back to Cody Stamann versus Song Yadong. The look of sheer surprise that Song Yadong was deducted a point for a clearly illegal knee was hilarious. Like the look of shock, like what? What? That's crazy. Like, and what rule set in North America is that legal? I just want to know. So, yeah, dude, really, read the rules.
Okay, timeout. Nobody talked about the one that I was most expecting everybody would be mentioning at the same time. Bryce Mitchell hit a twister at 4 minutes and 20 seconds.
Yeah.
You know what? I actually didn't get to see that particular fight. I was having issues with what platform to watch fights on, and bouncing around between different streaming services, and I just missed that one. So
for those that aren't aware, Eddie Bravo is a jiu-jitsu master and cannabis aficionado. And Bryce Mitchell hits the submission he creates at 420, and nobody's freaking out. Okay, fine. I'll stop then.
Oh, I didn't. Oh, I see what you did there.
Got it now.
I see. I thought those were palm trees leaves on your shirt. You slick motherfucker.
What are you gonna do? Gotta get the big sponsorship dollar somehow.
Shit, you better share that motherfucker. All right, so let's move on to the part of the show where you will all respect my authority, and that is called the speed bag. That is where I give you 10 seconds to answer a question. And if you don't, then I rudely cut you off and exert my authority. And I'm hoping somebody gives me a good power trip this week. So, Ben, I'm looking at you. And I want you to start this one off. So let me make sure I've got the timer set. All right. So you got 10 seconds here. Once my phone starts doing this dumb shit, there it is. Volume's up. And now you have 10 seconds to answer this question, sir. Which lip cut was worse, Alistair Overeem's or Robbie Lawler's after UFC 189 and go?
Overeem by far. Lawler's cut looked like a bad fight cut. Overeem looked like one of those dogs that they rescued that's been used to train other pit bulls to fight. He looked like he'd been mauled by a dog. Like, that was nasty as shit.
Oh, wow. This was there's a Michael Vick joke somewhere in here. But Kristen, your turn to answer this question. Which cut was worse, Overeem or Lawler?
Overeem as well. I mean, that was something that I thought for sure he was going to lose his lip. And it actually was my little tool to use to scare people today. I just ran up to everyone, showed them the cut. That's how bad it was.
That was very, you've traumatized all the kids in the neighborhood. All right, now, LJ, which one is worse, Overeem or Lawler?
She didn't say kids. She pictured her like pointing the phone down at children.
I just assumed Kristen was running up at preschools, just like showing all the kids like. I
mean, I work with college kids, so close enough.
Okay.
Yeah, it's about the same.
Just as immature.
Same.
Just as immature. Right. All right. So, Jay, 10 seconds. Which cut was worse?
Going 3 for 3. Overeem's. It was jagged. It was long. It was like a Harry Potter scar. But, Reem lost, so that's even worse.
Oh, good point there. Adding facts to an otherwise silly conversation. How dare you, sir? Now, will the UFC re-sign Thiago Alves now that his contract is up? If not, where will he land next? Jay, I'll just start with you.
So I'm going over. I'm letting you know I'm going over right now. So I'm going to deliver a special message to Mr. Alves. Hey, Thiago, it's Jay. We met in 2009 at Niagara Falls. I'm sure you remember. Now, anyways, I know you're getting older and your chin's probably fading, but what if I told you there's this magical place where you can take your gloves off and hit people in the face? And they can do it too. Just something to think about.
All right. Ben, 10 seconds. And
BKFC.
I guess actual 10 seconds. Jay greatly shitting on my authority. He will pay the consequences later. Ben, 10 seconds. Where does Thiago Alves go next?
I think the UFC actually re-signs him. Sign him like a short deal and let him finish out in the UFC. He's been a good guy for the company.
That's probably a correct answer, but a boring one. Kristen, save the day. Where does Thiago Alves go next?
I'd like to agree with Ben, but you know what? I could definitely see him over there with the monsters at KSW or bare knuckle fighting, but KSW for me.
Oh yeah, KSW. Yes, yes,
yes,
great. Yes.
That'd be so much fun.
Yes,
fighting like 185, 193.
Yes.
The blackest fighter at KSW.
Oh man. All right. So now I'll start with you on this one, Kristen. Can Nate Marquardt make anything out of his return to the sport after a 2-year retirement? And go.
I'm not entirely sure. I never like to see a fighter come back after they retired, especially 2 years away. I don't know what he's going to do next. I don't expect him to win anything. So, I don't know.
Yeah. All right. Jay, what about you? 10 seconds. What good comes out of Nate Marquardt returning to the sport?
Did you guys hear the way he talked about him coming out of retirement? That he spoke to God and God spoke back to him? I don't know if I want to see him fight again.
Yeah. All right. Ben, Nate Marquardt's retirement. Is it good or bad?
I may go over here. Anyone who knows me well knows that I am an atheist. You know, it's just the way I'm wired. I've never really been able to believe in the supernatural. You know, I grew up in a deeply religious home. I was surrounded by it, but I could just never process it. Like I'm an essentially rational person, whether that makes me smart or it just makes me unimaginative or faithless. I don't know which it is, you know, but I would rather believe that there's nothing after death than to believe that there is a supreme being that would tell Nate Marquardt to come back and fight some more. The problem is not just that he's 40 or that he lost something like 7 of his last 9, 5 of his last 7, something like that. It's that he looked so uninspired in the losses. I've seen some people use the fact that his last 3 losses were decisions as some sort of saving grace, but they were the most plodding type of decision. There was nothing in those that led you to believe that Marquardt threatened to win the fight at any point. The spectacular Marquardt that might do a button mash at any point, even in a fight that he was losing, wasn't there. Like, I don't see what there is to come back for other than some paydays. And if that's all you're in mixed martial arts for and you're 40, it's a dangerous place to be, and I hope he doesn't do it.
Wise words from Ben the Heathen Duffy.
I might go over Duffy. I started a bad precedent. I apologize. I'll make it up in this last one.
Go win back your King of Pancrase.
No,
I'll answer the last question.
You know what?
One word.
My authority has been usurped too much for this edition of the Speedback. Therefore, I'm taking away the 4th question.
Okay.
Only because I was going to tell it. Now I built it up, and the joke's probably not going to land good. So we'll just go ahead and keep this 4th question going. Kristen, I'll start with you since you clearly have respect for the rules, and you will be invited back where these other 2 will not. Now that Tito is in possession of a WWE title, who will he challenge next on his Legends Tour? You have 10 seconds.
There's only one answer here, and he was just released from the WWE. It's Sin Cara. That's how I see it happening.
Who?
Yeah.
It has to be. It has to be Sin Cara. Another Mexican wrestler? Come on.
And see, I'm going to take your word for it because I don't watch WWE.
Sin Cara?
How dare you?
Sin Cara.
I like PWG.
De la lucha libre.
I'm a PWG guy.
Uno de los estrellas más grandes de la lucha.
I don't know what you just said.
He'll explain it later. It's okay.
Es insoportable que no sabes quién es.
There's like one guy that's getting so mad watching this right now.
Did my camera stop for a sec? That was really weird.
No. You were still going.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So now Jay, your turn. Who does Tito fight next?
Vitor.
That's what's up. All right, Ben.
Told you. That's my penance. That's my penance.
You have some making up to do, Ben, for I am angered. But you can make it up with this. Who does Tito fight next?
Vanderlei, bare knuckle.
Oh, no, I don't want it.
Still film an orgasm. All right.
No, I don't want this to happen. No, it just happened. It's on.
All right, so now it's my turn to answer some questions. We have 4 questions instead of 3 this time, but I'm still just going to give myself 30 seconds to answer all 4 because I'm nice like that. So, the first question, the clock will start after I read the first question. Which lip cut was worse, Overeem or Robbie Lawler after UFC 189? I say Overeem because it was jagged, looked nasty. Lawler's was very clean, actually. Okay, the UFC might re-sign Thiago Alves, but I'm sure Dave Feldman is reaching for the Rolodex. Insert BKFC joke. Can Nate Marquardt make anything out of his return? The best thing he can do with this new Jesus thing, make an album with Kanye. And Tito Ortiz should fight Kevin Nash because Kevin Nash played the Russian who fought the Punisher. And yeah, Tito had the Punisher thing going. Oh my God, just under 30 seconds. I am the man. Now, Quintet Ultra takes place this weekend, pitting teams from the UFC, Pride, Strikeforce, and the WEC against one another. Quickly, who comes out on top? And we'll just open forum that one.
So I'll drop some knowledge to start things off and ruin everything. I did the numbers very briefly to find out, okay, MMA, because this is submission grappling. The rules are slightly different. Submission only. If you fight to a draw against your opponent, you're out, and the next fighter step in. So the team that has pulled off the most submissions, if you count them all up, is Pride. And the team that has performed the least is WEC. Now, if you look at the other way, the 5 fighters on the Strikeforce team have been submitted a total of 4 times. So I'm going to go with Strikeforce because they can eke out a win, maybe get a Jake Shields tap out, something going on, and then stall out everybody else and get draws and have that one win the advantage to knock out everybody else. So I'm going Strikeforce.
All right. Any other thoughts?
I'm sorry. Go ahead, Kristen, please.
Literally, mine's going to be like super quick. I am a flip-flopper as of today because I've actually been going back and forth between Pride and Strikeforce. But now that Jay gave me some stats, I'm kind of inclined to go to Strikeforce. I don't know. I trust Jay. So maybe Strikeforce, but definitely if there's a second place, maybe Pride.
I can show my work too.
Good. I need receipts.
Jay can always show his work.
All right, Ben.
I'm actually with Jake kind of for the opposite reason. I mean, I think Jake Shields might be able to take on the entirety of any of the other teams and at least not get tapped. I mean, at the same event that I missed this Saturday, he went head-to-head with Romulo Barral, who is one of the best grapplers on the planet, and did to him kind of the same thing he does in MMA. Just put the ball in the dirt and ground him out. Like, if you love Jake Shields like I do, he is just kryptonite for almost anybody. I mean, in more recent years, as he's like hit the age of 40, like some people have knocked him out. But for the entirety of his, like the first 15 years of his career, whether you were talking about wrestling, MMA, or grappling, he was just the guy that it was impossible to look good against. He was a guy that took the air out of the ball. And, he did that to one of the best grapplers in the world in his weight class this Saturday. And against a bunch of like fellow former MMA fighters, I think he would stand out from the pack, even from other guys like Sakuraba, and Gilbert Durinho. I think when this thing comes out, Shields is going to make a lot of the rest of these people look pretty amateurish.
I'm kind of feeling that too. I mean, Jake Shields is like the kryptonite for everybody once you touch the floor. Also, King Mo was on that team. King Mo is one of the best collegiate wrestlers to ever step foot into a cage. Kind of hard to look over him. Yeah, I see Strikeforce kind of running the table here, and even some of the other notable names, like for instance, most of the guys from Pride. I mean, like Kazushi Sakuraba, Takanori Gomi, Hector Lombard. I mean, those are guys who, granted, this isn't MMA, but you talk about really, really past it physically. I just don't see them doing well in any sort of athletic endeavor against people who have similar credentials, similar skills, and are 15 years younger with a lot less tread on the tires. So that'll be my guess.
I want to ask or raise something real quick. A lot of these fights, now this is a grappling competition, but it's submission only. A lot of these fighters don't submit people. Not their game, not their bag. Rumble Johnson, how many times has he tapped anybody? Anybody? Give me a guess. How many submissions does Rumble Johnson have on his record? If you guessed 0, you'd be accurate. Mark Munoz, how many submissions does he have? Now, MMA is all different. Okay, something like that. But submission attempts, great wrestlers and great whatever may or may not translate. But to me, it's like having a submission guy go to BKFC. What are you doing here? We have the possibility to have Anthony Johnson versus Glover Teixeira 2. That could very well happen. Now, what is that going to mean when Rumble can't walk up and Tiger uppercut him? I don't know. But neither of those guys are submission guys. So I don't know. I'm really curious to see how this is going to play out.
Yeah, this is going to be a strange one, to say the least. But it sounds like a fun idea. Yeah,
and
it's going to be.
I mean, if any of my fellow panelists or anyone watching the show, if you've not watched the Quintet event yet, Quintet is what I would point someone at that is an MMA fan that thinks grappling is boring. Because it's really easy to grasp what the dynamic is. It's fun as hell. And more than any other rule set, I would argue, it has succeeded in incentivizing the competitors to do exciting things without making it seem phony. No yellow cards, no red cards, just a really, really obvious incentive to try to finish the match.
All right. So of course, the Quintet Ultra event is part of the festivities for the big pay-per-view card this weekend. That's UFC 245. So final pay-per-view of the year, 3 titles on the line. It's so much on this card that we could be talking about. We could do a separate show just about that. But we're going to briefly sum up potential fight of the night candidates, what matchups stand out the most to us, and whatnot. So, Kristen, I will start with you. What's a fight that you're particularly looking forward to on this card?
I feel like my answer is probably going to be the most obvious one, and it is the featured prelim on the preliminary card, and that has to be Mike Perry versus Jeff Neal. I feel like a lot of people are super excited about this fight because this is one of those that it's going to be like, it's as advertised, and the advertisement is sheer violence. Someone is going to get knocked out, and that is definitely going to happen in this fight. I'd be disappointed if it didn't happen. You know, Mike Perry's been cleaning himself up. He's been trying to get more technical and stuff like that. And I love it. I love to see a fighter come full circle and all that. But I wish he would just throw, as Dominic Cruz would say, reckless abandonment out the window and just start swinging left and right. And I just want to see who goes down first. That's all I want to see at this point. So that is definitely my fight of the night candidate, even with the main event, the co-main event, and I do even say co-main event because it's three championships. Like, how do you even say that?
I'll go with co-main event.
Yeah. Right, co-main event.
Yeah.
It doesn't roll off the tongue as easy as I thought it would. But
I mean, you say Coco because it's 2 people of color in that fight, so you just say Coco.
I'm not doing this with you today. I'm not doing this with you. No, that's not what I meant. But you know. So it's going to be Mike Perry and Jeff Neal for me. That's my fight of the night.
Well, we definitely know Usman and Covington is not the Coco fight. So,
no.
All right, Ben, what's a fight that you're particularly looking forward to on this card?
Very much the opposite of what I usually say when you ask me this question on a Monday. This card has an embarrassment of riches. Obviously, it's topped with 3 title fights, but top to bottom, all the fights are at least interesting. I mean, if Matt Brown and Ben Saunders are not completely dilapidated, because obviously both of them are, you know, in the final act of their careers, that could offer just a nasty finish. And I would say of every fight on this card, that is the one where if you ran it 10 times, I would be least able to predict you how it would turn out. Both of the guys are just a little too spent and have too many offensive weapons still left in their arsenal. But Matt Brown's elbow knockout of Diego Sanchez is the only time I have ever felt comfortable using the word gangster as an adjective. That was gangster as fuck. So I lean slightly towards him, even though Ben Saunders, living in Florida, could probably hit me with a clinch knee from here where I sit.
All right, Jay. Give me a fight on this card that you're particularly looking forward to.
Well, first, I'm trying to remember, and you guys can think of this while I'm talking. Who was the commentator that used to say throwing bungalows? I can't place.
Used to say that. Didn't he say that when he was guest commentating an event with
I think
Yes,
him and
Rampage coined it,
Charles
but
Bennett?
then I heard Jordan Breen say it 350 times since then. So, like, it was lost to me in the mists of time who originally said
like
it.
I knew Breenisms, but it came from something. Okay. Anyway, yeah, throwing bungalows. That's the Perry Neal
It was
fight.
Rampage, I think, guest commentating like a Pride event. Maybe the same one where
Yeah.
he couldn't stop talking about how hairy Heath Herring's legs were or something.
That's probably exactly what it was. That's probably exactly
he's
what
got some
it
hairy
was.
legs.
So
Get up, Kimbo. Get up, Kimbo.
Hey, it's better than Tito yelling up. The fight otherwise that sticks out to me because it's going to answer a lot of questions is Peter Yan Uriah Faber, because this is going to tell us where is Uriah Faber. Was the Ricky Simone fight any indication of what could be to come for the nearly 40-year-old man who has knockout power when he never had it before? And that the strikes he landed on Ricky Simone were not strikes he normally would throw with that intent. Sure, first round, everybody's fresh and he's hyped up, but no, man. Like I said on our show a couple days ago, the last time he scored a knockout was over, making Joe Pearson tap to strikes in 2007. So, that's a knockout to some people, but a clean knockout, a knockout like that, where it's like, oh snap, that's it. And Peter Yan, Peter Yan's the guy who people were wondering, is he going to get a title shot next? What he did to Jimmy Rivera, he outclassed him. The John Dawson fight with Peter Yan, where Yan was winning probably, I don't know, the first 3 minutes of the third round and every round, everything up to that point. And then Dodson kind of had him on the ropes a little bit. But he still stayed consistent and he was strong. And he's won every fight for, how many since ACB. So it's probably about an eight fight win streak. So this is a real statement fight. And I'm really looking forward to it because I'm worried about the fight that comes after between Marias and Aldo. So I think this is the one where I'm going to go, okay, we're sure it's going to happen. It's really going to tell us something.
So, good call right there. And I'll have to say the toughest fight for 245 for me has to be Jose Aldo, not against Marlon Moraes, but against the scale that he will face the day before. That is going to be the highlighted event for me. Like I have to see what's going on here. This is nuts that he's fighting at 135, a guy who has had trouble making 145 and has looked like death on the scale. So the only logical thing to do is lose another 10 pounds. Great idea. Well, that's super trash. So I guess we'll go ahead because I know this will start a larger discussion. But I guess we got to have it to an extent. I know we're short on time here, but Colby Covington, Kamaru Usman, is kind of the fight that has legitimate sport behind it, where Tito and Alberto Del Rio don't, but sort of represent similar ideals politically. Colby made quite the appearance on a political podcast. Candace Owens such a fucking joke, but he was on the show, so I have to say her name, fucking goofball. But anyway, and Colby once again kind of took the mask off and kind of unveiled that this is a character that he's playing now. Why are we talking about this shit again? I'm sorry.
If we truly believe that Colby Covington was going to get cut or not re-signed after doing what he did to Damian Maia, you're crazy. There's no way the UFC, even though his style had been lauded as being a little unexciting for the most part, there's no way they could have let him go a top 5 guy just because, I don't know. The UFC doesn't do that when a guy has a winning streak very often, if at all. I can't think of anybody. They will jump at the opportunity. As soon as that fighter has a loss or a controversial fight, John Fitch was let go after what, one loss?
Yeah, Yushin Okami as well.
Yushin Okami was let go. If he had lost to Damian Maia, they'd dump him in a heartbeat. But for him to say that this made him, really though, it feels like that's another, like, this is 4D chess. Maybe I'm overthinking this game, but oh, hey, look at that. But it seems to me that Colby has another character, the exposed side, I know I'm make a lot of people mad, but let me tell you how I really feel, which feels to me like a character. It feels to me like an additional thing to have a sympathetic personality. Oh, he's just doing this. Yeah, I guess he's actually a nice guy. And our own colleague Jason Burgos, who knew him before he went heel or whatever, speaks highly of him. But this is all marketing to me. This is all personalities on. Okay, I'm the bad guy with a heart of gold, and it didn't land for me. But I want you guys to hit me with your best shot.
I just want to know which one of his personalities goes to the ATM to pay the IG hoes. Which one? Which one hits the ATM up? But Ben, I know you want to say something serious about this.
Well, I mean, I don't have much funny to say about this. I've weighed in on Covington before. More than offensive, I've mostly found him just kind of tedious in this most recent run. You know, I'm not overly sensitive about most of the things he talks about. You know, to me, a fighter, you know, talking on the mic, trying to hype up a fight, he's either interesting or not. He's either funny or not. And if it's offensive, like, I mean, that's secondary to me, honestly. This whole thing is entertainment. I don't pick this apart any more than I pick apart, you know, music, lyrics, or, you know, like the political stances of like Picasso or Miles Davis or somebody. You know, it's entertainment. I try to divorce the artist from the art. Having said that, this appearance on the Candace Owens Show left a bad taste in my mouth, because on the one hand, you know, as annoying as he's been, I do sympathize on some level with fighters that feel pressure from the UFC to step outside of their native personality and what they're comfortable with to sell. I do feel that. And I do believe that fighters probably do feel some amount of pressure for against their continued employment, you know, based on how sensational they can be. I remember one of my first interviews after I entered this industry on a professional level was with Frank Mir. And as a longtime fan, I mean, back in the day when I had favorite fighters, Frank Mir was my first favorite fighter back in like 2003, 2004. You know, the one heavyweight that didn't look like he just rolled off a bar stool, you know, to throw like sloppy bungalows, as we're saying. And he said something to me, because we were talking about the time that he got censured by the UFC and lost his job as a WEC commentator for saying that he wanted to make Brock Lesnar the first in octagon fatality. I don't know if y'all remember that. It was like 2011. It wasn't even building up to a Brock fight. It was building up to the Carwin fight.
So
but whoever won that was going to get the next shot at Lesnar. And he talked to me about, you know, those UFC kind of interview in front of the camera segments, you know, that they do for the hype reel for every fight. You know, they have the fighter talking
right before
and
Face the
questions.
Pain played.
Yeah, and sometimes obviously responding to something the other fighter said. And he walked me through that. He's like, you're sitting there, you've been there for 2 hours, 4 hours, 5 hours. The camera's pointing at you, so when you're watching it, you only see the fighter with like the one spotlight on him, but the fighter's looking out there, he sees the cameraman, whoever from the UFC is asking the questions, like 8 other people, and he's like, they'll ask you a question or be like, your opponent said this, this, and that. What do you say to that? And you'll give them an answer, and they'll be like, that wasn't quite hot enough. Try it again. And he's like, I felt like a hostage. He's like, until I said something crazy enough that they could put it in the scissor reel, they weren't letting me go.
Dang.
And this is Frank Mir. I mean, you know his personality. He has always been willing to just say the outrageous thing if it was on his mind. So I understand the pressure that these fighters, well, as much as an outsider can, I understand the pressure these fighters must feel. But I don't believe Covington for a second when he says that the UFC told him in advance of the fight that they were letting him go win or lose. What would be the point of even telling a fighter that?
No way.
It opens up the door for disaster.
If you said that to the wrong fighter, say
Leslie Smith,
Leslie Smith, Nate Quarry, they would have walked into that octagon and just said to the nearest live mic, hey, yo, guess what the hell just happened, before walking out of the cage before the fight even started. They would never do that. Especially to a wrestler from Oregon, because wrestlers from Oregon tend not to want to play the game with the UFC all the time.
Yeah.
So I don't believe that for a second. And that he would say that, I mean, leaving aside that he would even go on Candace Owens to say this stuff, tempers my sympathy for him. That's what I have to say about that. Hopefully it didn't go too long.
Kristen, anything you want to add?
Yeah, I actually spoke to Kamaru Usman this morning, and I asked him about that very thing, if he was worried about his fight becoming so politicized that the focus was not so much on the fight anymore. It was much more about the narrative. And especially there's clearly a lot of political narrative, political game being played here. And he's like, at the end of the day, it didn't even bother me because I know for a fact that I'm about to go into a cage and fight this person. That's the only thing that matters. And I could care less about the props. I could care less about whatever it is that he's trying to drum up. We're fighting on Saturday. That's all that matters. You're not going to take your hat. You're not going to take your book. You're not taking any of that into the octagon. It's just me and you. So when he said that, I was like, you know what? That's right. They're going to fight at the end of the day. So why should I even give an ounce of reaction to what it is that Colby is saying to drum up interest into the fight? And I think, I don't know if he was trying to look for sympathy points with Candace Owens, like saying, well, I had to behave this way, otherwise I would have lost my job. Yeah, sure, that could have been a very real possibility for you, but the fact that you pick that kind of character that is the lowest form of entertainment at that point, it's like, to me, it's not funny, to me, it's not riveting, to me, it's not controversial, it's just poorly done. And if you line it up against someone like a Tito Ortiz, for example, a lot of people, they don't really see anything wrong with what Tito does because he's been doing this for years and it comes across as authentic. When it's Colby Covington, you could see the switch go from up and down. You can see that immediately. So it's just like, if you could turn something on and off, so can I. And that would have to be my attention when it comes to whatever it is that you're trying to spew to drum up interest in your fight.
Ooh, bars times 2. Oh my goodness. We got I got that hot fire. All right.
Hot.
Yeah, that was you're up there with Dylon.
Dylon. Who else but Dylon?
Dylon's a legend. Very quickly, because we are super short on time, on a scale of 1 to 10, and we'll go around this, how hostile will this crowd be due to the political divide that is probably going to exist inside T-Mobile Arena? I'll start with you, Jay. On a scale of 1 to 10.
You use a prop twice in a night for an unexpected reason. I do truly think that isn't just, opportunity. I think there's going to be some people that are going to take it personally. There are going to be some people that take it and feel this, because there are some people that actually believe the things that Colby Covington says. Not that they believe him saying it, but they believe the things that he is spouting, the political leanings and feelings and hostility and whatnot. There are people that are in those camps. So there are also people that are going to hear his words and feel personally affected by it. And so they should. You can't just stick to sports, as Deadspin apparently wants their guys to do. It's going to spill over to a little bit, but they're in Vegas, so it's a transient crowd. It isn't a crowd of locals of one specific demographic to speak of. It isn't going to be in Houston or in Boston or in a particular crowd that statistically speaking has certain demographics. It's going to be in a more open arena. So it's going to get people upset. There are going to be boo birds plenty, but it's not going to be overwhelming.
All right. Scale of 1 to 10, how hostile will the crowd be, Ben?
5, but they will be met by another 5 that will be in support of him. It's going to be super loud, but it won't be obviously for or against them. He's going to be divisive, but evocative.
All right. Kristen, scale of 1 to 10.
Yeah, I'd have to go with a 5 too. I don't expect it to be too loud considering the location. If this was a Madison Square Garden kind of card, it could be a totally different story. 100% a different story if it was a different location. But considering that it's in Las Vegas, that's the city of entertainment essentially for a lot of people, especially for sports. So I don't know if they're going to get super involved about it, or maybe they could surprise me and just be really affected by a lot of the things that Colby has said, or a lot of the things that Kamaru has said, whatever may seem offensive to you at that point. But we'll have to see. At the end of the day, it's good fights. That's what you should be worried about, not whatever someone said beforehand or whatever someone brought out to a pre-fight press conference.
All right. So I'll think I'll lean more toward you guys, but I'll give it a 6 on a 1 to 10 scale. I will agree for sure about the location kind of negating a lot of this. I was in the building in Anaheim for Colby Covington making an appearance in the crowd at 241 and everyone erupting into ruckus boos, and how riled up everyone got and random fuck you chants starting up. But I will say this one thing for sure. I mean, the area of Orange County isn't known exactly for racial tolerance. Now, if that fight, because there was a point in time where Colby Covington was supposed to challenge Tyron Woodley, and they were trying to put that fight together in Anaheim. And one thing that I said, I don't know if I said this on a show or not, but I definitely said this in private conversations with fellow media members. If that fight took place there, I was fully prepared to hear the N-bomb directed at me at some point in the crowd, and somebody was going to catch these hands. So that was just going to have to happen. I was going to wreck somebody's ass and with my suit on. But we'll move on from this delightful topic for me, challenging non-existent people to fight. So we're going to wrap things up with Buried Treasure, and this is where we highlight a story that probably should have gotten more coverage. And Kristen, I will start with you. What's your buried treasure for the week?
Yeah, so my buried treasure is the Mark Hunt finalization of his case against the UFC. He very clearly lost. He was very upset about that. But now it is being said that the UFC is going after the legal fees that they had to spend to litigate their case. And that's around $400,000. Now, Jay, I don't know if you have the numbers about this, but I don't know has Mark Hunt made that much? I'm pretty sure he has, but I don't know if he has. Yeah, he has, but I'm not sure if he has any of that just at the ready to go.
Right.
So I feel like this is a warning shot to the UFC for a lot of those fighters who may find themselves in a position like Mark Hunt. You know, if you cross us, this is something that could potentially happen to you. And I don't know how many fighters are willing to take that battle to anywhere near the lengths of Mark Hunt.
All right. Ben, what is your buried treasure this week?
Well, now it's like asking the camera, does Mark Hunt look like he has a fucking 401k? I mean, what an effective deterrent for future people who might consider the same thing. Anyway, my buried treasure for the week is that former WEC bantamweight champion and former UFC interim bantamweight champion Renan Barao was released by the promotion in the past week. Barao, 34-9 with 1 no contest, leaves behind a pretty storied career. And as I've thought about Barao since I read the announcement of his release, it occurred to me that, I mean, let alone the WEC era, even if you came to the sport in the post Conor and Ronda era, like post 2014 or so, you may not understand why this is a big deal. You know, and if you're old school enough that you saw him in anything near his prime, it's a big deal. And the thing about Barao is that more than almost any other fighter I can think of, the dividing line between his prime and his, oh my God, he's dead and washed up, is sharper and faster than any other high-level fighter I can think of in the history of the sport. It is completely insane. He lost his first fight out of the gate when he was like 17 years old. And then he went on a 33-fight streak where he went 32-0 with 1 no contest. He was unbeaten for over 30 fights. And during that time, he mopped up the Brazilian regional scene. And I was among the people that, even before he went to the WEC, I'm like, this guy who was in the Fight Finder as, Renan Mota Pegado do Nascimento Barao, this guy is the truth. As soon as he gets to America, he is going to mop the hell out of the Miguel Torreses of the world. And then he landed in the WEC, and he did. And, he was a fantastic grappler, not a super technically sound striker, but an ultra hard striker, a titanic bantamweight by the standards of the day. I mean, for 7 years straight, the only thing this guy couldn't win at 135 pounds is a Renan Barao lookalike contest, because he looked like the fucking crypt keeper on the scale every damn time. And then right around 2014, it went like this. He lost his interim title to TJ Dillashaw. He went 2-7, 2-8 since then. Never looked good. Slipped in a hotel bathtub while cutting weight and conked his head, or at least that's the story he gave. It is entirely possible that that's a cover-up for the fact that he was in a hotel bathtub realizing he was going to miss weight by 7 pounds. The weight cut just caught up with him. And people who were there live at events at the time, talked about just how he looked even more deathly than any other fighter they'd ever seen. But the real thing around it is he is 32 years old, and he is already 5 years past the expiration date of his apparent career as a high-level fighter. And it is just crazy to see. I hope he socked away some money. Thank you very much for all the memories, Renan Barao, and whether there's some sort of comeback in the future after a retooling and rethinking, or he moves on, to the next thing, coaching or whatever it is, I certainly wish him the best. But Renan Barao has been released by the UFC.
Insert Dave Feldman joke. Jay, please share your buried treasure this week.
He might just drink 1 glass of water and all of a sudden look like Chris Lieb, and his head just goes.
No, what if he what if he has like a light heavyweight resurgence like Rumble?
Just all the time, all he needed was some water. All of a sudden, he's gonna be walking around like swole as fuck,
ready to go. Suddenly, middleweight Barao. Man, that'd be pretty good. I'm okay with that. I'm gonna keep it in the same area. Now, I apologize and appreciate all the viewers who have stuck with us this length of the show. We've had a lot to talk about. I have to get something off my chest, so you can skip this segment if you don't want to hear me talk about this. Liz Carmouche, 2-time UFC title challenger, was also released this past week. And there's a slightly different set of circumstances. She didn't go on a lengthy losing streak. She had performances that may not have been completely inspiring, but she was coming off of a decision loss to the champion, Valentina Shevchenko, who has beaten everybody not named Amanda Nunes, basically. And she was in Washington, D.C. On Friday, I believe, doing media and promotional appearances for the UFC's return to Washington, D.C. She was in photo ops and things like that, where the UFC would literally write, and I'm quoting here, "An honor to spend the day with the brave men and women who serve our country." Now, Carmouche is a Marine. She spent almost 2 years stationed in Iraq, so she has military backing. So there was several reasons why they utilized her. She was informed that her contract was terminated during the promotional appearances. She was apparently in the car with people like Reed Harris of WEC fame when she got the message from her manager that she was let go. In the car with UFC officials and people that would be in the know, that should have had knowledge of this. Nobody knew. Nobody cared to let the people who should know. And my issue and my rant that I've been chewing on for the past couple days is this inherent lack of communication the UFC seems to have with its fighters, with its managers, with its trainers and everybody else, where fighters will frequently have to find out about news about their life through social media because somebody like me writes up news on a Friday for SureDog.com and writes a story about it, and they hear I've been released from my contract, and they hear it from the media. This is a story that I've seen time and time again, or it's about matchups announcements or withdrawals from fights where a fighter has been announced and reported to have pulled out of a fight, where they will come onto social media. I've seen this at least 2 times. I can't place the fighters, where they will say, "No, I'm fine. Thanks for asking, but no, I'm good. I don't know what's going on here." Where there will be scuttlebutt in an official form, where the news will circle around to them. And that can't be. I get it. The UFC has a roster of 500, 600 people. They're stacked. They have a lot of people to worry about. But this has to be number one. Fighter relations has to be important enough where you will tell your fighters information that is critical to them. When fighters are told they're fighting somebody, when the news article will say that so-and-so has agreed to the fight, and they will then post on social media, whether true or not, they will post publicly on social media, I haven't accepted this fight, guys. I don't know what's going on here. Or, I didn't know I was released. Oh my God. Like there was a fighter last month, a Contender Series alum, I believe, who was released after a few appearances, didn't have a very successful time, wasn't a big name, but was kind of just one of those under-the-bus releases. Found out on Instagram, posted on Instagram, "Hey, so I just found out from MMA Junkie or MMA Fighting or MMA Weekly or FanSided, whatever news site that had broken the story at that time. Hey, sure would have been nice to have a phone call." Now, that it just can't be. It can't be like that. Now the story is coming out more and more, and it's every bit of it is worse. Seeing that they drop the ball, but they couldn't drop the ball if this is a regular occurrence that happens all the time. Now I don't know, just conceptually, how they can release a fighter on Thursday and have them come out to an appearance on Friday. They're no longer with the company. They have been, liquidated of their duties, and are being required to attend UFC promotional event because the right people who didn't give the right word don't know, and so suddenly she's mandated to come. No, it can't be like that.
She also paid her own way too.
She paid her own way. It cannot be like that. Regardless of the fact that she just fought for a title and is a top 3 fighter in her division and has a win over the champion in the past, champion, challenger, contender, or debuting fighter, it can't be like that. It can't. That's not a functional organization where the people in your company don't find out about that. It would be like if I were let go on SureDog and I was let go on Wednesday and I found out about it, not through my employer, not through people I work with, but I found out about it because somebody on MMA Fighting said there's been a shakeup in the media landscape. That is what happens. And it's preposterous. The reason that they try and justify it by saying that she had beaten people except for the champion, and so therefore she was taking out contenders. You can't explain after the fact, "Oh, we did this because of this," when you made an egregious error in the first place. And it's not reasonable to think this is a standard operating procedure, that this is something that happens, but it happens all the time. And it bothers me enough to talk about it for several minutes, so thank you for sticking with me. But this happens, and it can happen, and yet it continues to happen. And it's terrible. I feel for Liz Carmouche and all the fighters that had to deal with this, to find out news about their life, not for the people that should be telling them. I don't know.
Yeah, it reminds me of Nico Montoya being stripped of her title, finding out through
on internet.
Yeah, on the internet, her manager just saw a social media post and told her while she was in the hospital. Even when I got let go from Sherdog, I got a text message, so that's what's up. So my buried treasure for the week actually piggybacks off of some of what you guys talked about, specifically you, Kristen, and you, Jay, about some of the PR snafus that the UFC has had, them going after Mark Hunt for legal fees and cutting Liz Carmouche while she's making a promotional appearance for the company. Well, I just gotta love the timing of the very pro UFC tweets from former champions Daniel Cormier and Michael Bisping, also UFC commentators. Their pro UFC tweets about how the promotion gave them these unasked for, just sudden holiday bonuses, and they were so thankful. Yeah, just the timing, man. Just the timing. Just
substitute holiday bonus for job after I'm done fighting, and it makes a lot more sense.
Yeah. Shout out to Chuck Liddell's cushy executive job. Yeah. So I mean, if you paid these fighters what they're worth in the first place, these little bonuses wouldn't be that big of a deal now, would they? Just saying. Reebok money ain't going to cut it. So now, that is going to do it for this edition of Unleashed. So once again, want to thank Kristen King, our special guest, for coming on the show. Kristen, tell all the good folks watching you on the Walkout Network where they can find you.
You guys can find me at FanSided MMA and My MMA News.
That's what's up. And below her, you will see the Twitter handle. So please follow. And Jay, where can the good folks find you besides that lovely Twitter handle that is right below you?
Gotta find that lovely Twitter handle, Sherdog.com. You can hit the features button. I don't write scathing op-eds. I just speak them into fruition. So unfortunately, you can't get more of that anger and rage. I'm more buttoned up for my stats, my play-by-play, my betting odds, my news for Sherdog.com. Features tab, drop down. Jay Petrie's there. A certain Anthony Walker and a certain Benjamin Duffy are also on that list.
The archive of Ant Walker. Ben, where can the good folks find you?
You can find me on Twitter at Benjamin Duffy. You can find me on Sherdog.com, where I am senior editor, and I do dust off the old keyboard from time to time to write a piece. And unlike Jay, I do write scathing pieces from time to time. If you want to read a piece with a little bit of scathing to it, there is a long-form article about Combate Americas Tito versus Alberto, which by the time you read this will probably still be on the front page. Go ahead and click it if you just kind of want to see the whole ridiculousness of the event through my eyes. There's a lot of good, little bad, and that's what it is.
Almost felt
missing that last thing.
Yeah, a little gimmick infringement there for a second there. I don't know. It was good. It was good, bad, and what?
Oh,
a whole lot of.
The only ugly was on press row, and at least some of it was me. So.
Oh, well, of course, you can find me, Ant Walker, on the Walkout Network, the only place you can find me as of now. I've done quite the rounds on like other appearances lately. I've been on Mixed Combat Radio and Submission Radio and somewhere else. I did iFox with Juice. I've been kind of making the rounds with some of the homies, but definitely check out on Mixed Combat Radio the big panel discussion that we had about UFC 245, going really into detail about the key matchups there. So a great conversation between myself, Jay, and Ben, who you see right here, Matt Hunter, who runs Mixed Combat Radio, and Matthew Wells, Cole Shelton as well. All great guys, all great stuff. So go ahead and check that out as well. But in the meantime, they could possibly be a walk of shame on the Walkout Network after UFC 245. We shall see. I don't know, but I have a feeling it will be. Now, you know what you got to do. You got to stay beautiful. You got to stay positive. And most of all, you have got to stay sexy. I will see you when I see you. Peace.